thought it was really really a glimmer of hope for me personally and for where I come from. Because why am I still in blockchain when everything is crumbling? And I don't know if you guys know about the market, but everything really sucks. And there's a lot of scammers right now going on. And so it's really, really hard to keep the faith and keep building in the space. And, I see a ton of potential, but it's very hard to see it, especially when the news of new scams drown you and the market's not great. Well, I come from this. I was born and raised in Argentina. I lived there for 26 years. I actually left Argentina because I wasn't feeling safe walking down the street as a woman. And because at the moment that I left, they started blocking our access to international currency towards concentrating it to the peso. And when I left Argentina, I was making 500 USD, and now the money that I was making would actually be only affording one coffee. So it's really bad. It's really, really bad there. There's corruption, there's protests, it's unsafe. Inflation was, last time I checked, at 107%. So the ideas of having a currency that we could still control a little bit more than the National Reserve and the dollar and the hedge funds and everything that supports crisis economies was incredibly interesting. And the idea to have an open, verifiable, transparent ledger was even better for me, because our ex-president went to prison and she's banned of like running office again because she's accused and prosecuted. So I'm really interested in transparency, honestly. So I've been in blockchain since 2017. As I mentioned, I've worked in infrastructure projects. I worked in many ICOs back in the day as well. And I also started this organization based in Berlin that's called the Department of Decentralization. That's supposed to help with educational alternatives. We did 2 hackathons and many, many conferences. The hackathons were ETH Berlin. They were super fun. They're still running. I just left the organization. I retired from that because I think that the Department of Decentralization can't have a main figurehead for a very long time. The leadership has to change from time to time to still keep it reasonably fair. But I'm very proud of it. And it's still running, and they're doing a protocol conference in September. So you should check it out. These are the 2 papers that I wrote with collaborators within the Department of Decentralization about cultural infrastructure, about blockchain funding models, about NFTs before they were cool and before they were insane as well, and about intellectual rights and crypto-anarchists and every kind of intersection that we saw that could actually help the creator economy. Yeah, this was in 2020. Our last paper was in 2021. Now in 2023, I don't know if if blockchain has really served the creator economy, but we're still to see. It's still interesting for all the reasons that I mentioned, and because there's people prototyping and there's people experimenting, and one day one of those experiments that's great and that's honest will actually stick. So I'm looking forward. I also do a bunch of art projects. This is an art project that we did with Hitosh Tayal, and we appropriated the ETH domain of the Bundeskunsthalle, and then we presented different governance models, and we submitted them to quadratic voting of the audience. Our project won. I'm still waiting for the Bundeskunsthalle to implement my DAO. I'm very upset. So if you guys know anyone at the Bundeskunsthalle, it's been a year. it's about time. Yeah, you can find that one on strikeDAO.com, and it's super fun. You can also find it on YouTube, and it's a great 1-hour presentation of alternative governance models for a traditional institution. The resulting artwork of this also got collected by the Bundeskunsthalle, so it was really a once-in-a-lifetime thing where I also got this artwork that I co-created, collected by a major German institution. Not so bad for my first trial with art. And then I'm currently focused on building JPEG, which is a company and a protocol that is trying to create cultural infrastructure for Web3 cultural objects, so NFTs, basically. And yeah, this is currently my project. We work on a taxonomy for NFTs that is crowdsourced and that decentralizes the taste-making apparatus. But essentially, throughout my career, I have built things that add value to blockchain because I really think that the technology is super promising, and that the idea of decentralized currencies is even more promising. So yeah, this is me. Yeah, these are NFTs. This is a prototype on a computer-aided curating from the 90s. So I didn't invent anything. I just reshuffle things and make them fit into the NFT ecosystem. But there's many precedents, and we need to understand all of these precedents in order to rebuild the things and in order to build better as well. And these are the canons or the taxonomies, as I mentioned. And yeah, these are 2 examples. You can check them on jpeg.space. And I guess that's it, and I'm gonna pass it on to Erik.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a project I co-founded involving circus artists called The Sphere. I'm Erik. I'm a researcher. I work half in academia and half in the Web3 space building things. And the building ethos really matters, and I appreciate, Maria Paula, that you described where you're coming from, because you mentioned faith earlier. I mean, belief, trust. You need at some point to take risks, and it's good to see that, like, where it's coming from. If I resonate with that, like, I'm basically engaged in the blockchain space following the Occupy Wall Street movement, and basically thinking that we need to carve out tools, instruments, weapons that will be able to tackle financial capitalism on its own ground. So you can't fight financial capitalism without carving your own types of financial abstractions. That's how I got kind of initiated to the blockchain space. Long story short, so I call myself sometimes a financial activist in that sense. I wrote a book a couple of years ago now about how to save the common of communism. And these days I feel like I'm more into saving capital from capitalism, because the blockchain technology, Web3, it's a way to redefine the categories of ownership or the categories of the accumulators of wealth. It opens up the imaginary about what type of collectivities we can generate that have financial fangs, so that you're not only writing grants for surviving, or at least you write grants in other conditions. These are some of the reasons why we created the Sphere. And I will indulge, because it's such a short presentation, I cannot tell you everything about the type of crowdfunding campaign that we generated, but basically we managed to gather funding to empower, is it gonna come back? Yeah. To power an ecosystem that is self-generative. So basically, we're tackling a very interesting issue. Like, circus world and Web3 world are pretty much as far apart as you can imagine, and putting NFTs on circus performances is not exactly an easy problem to solve neither. So that's what I want to share with you today. It's like a thinking experiment almost, you know? It's like, how do you create a financial, like a funding model for live arts that involves something like NFTs, and what do you tokenize exactly? You tokenize a presentation, you tokenize a film about the performance. We decided to go a little bit further and to try to think the question how to collect live art. So using NFTs to collect live art, and basically collecting live art means investing in the collective that produces live art. So you have the collectives that generate collectibles at some point. So I thought maybe the best way to go here is to present just a little bit of a short excerpt of a film that we've made with one of the artists that received funding through our crowdfunding campaign. Her name is Antonia. And you will see, I'm just going to put 1 minute, but it's just to give you a bit of a sense of the forces that we're working with here, you know. It's a real challenge to bring the financial imaginary to something like circus art, which is like extremely embodied analog and evolves in communities, you know. It's a very grounded practice. So let's see, yep.
The beauty of the Sphere project, taking something that was finished in a way and making it live another life. And we are curious what is going to be this another life. It's really interesting actually to, in a way, hand your performance to another artist and wait and see, and like not being able to influence. But this is also a beauty of it. It's also really nice that in the same time we are also doing the same thing. The original performance was about schizophrenia, and it was about how to present the disease from the inside. So we were doing a lot of dislocation and showing the impact of the disease from the inside to the outside, with the contortion of course. And now we are really trying to make it from the outside first. So this was one of the reasons why we are trying to do this. First we did it manually. So Jakob was working with the fishing threads, and now we design a machine that is actually doing it, and there is a sensor, and it's working by...
Okay, so super quickly, this is an example of what we call a derivative work. So it's a new version of an original work. In this case, it's the same collective that does its own work in a new version, but we also we basically accumulate funding so that other artists who are interested in taking this original seed performance and transform it, create a new version of it, we're trying to empower that. So right now we have two main seed performances, this one from room 100 and another one called Materia. Materia involves polystyrene, so we have two derivatives for Materia and one derivative work for Antonia's work. So we have 5 work total right now that we're incubating in the Sphere. And what I want maybe to share with you, and it's really to enrich or nurture the conversation about communities, you know, like Web3 is all about digital tribes, squads, communities, name it, you know, it's a collective movement so that you empower certain collectives so that they can go further. My question is kind of like, okay, what is circus teaching doing to the Web3 space? And what I can say, coming from a financial activism background, is that if finance fundamentally is about risk management, the whole financial infrastructure is based on the idea of risk management, insurance, and so on. What circus can do to participate in the conversation of alternative modes of funding, alternative ecologies of funding, is that they are a good place where to look at if you want to start building protocols for shared metastability. Not diminishing risk, but learning to risk and speculate together. So that's let's say, my ingredient for the conversation here. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Sorry. You.
Oh, yours is here, yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I love this connection between finance and circus. It's indeed an unusual one, but lots to take away. So should I start with my first question? I think it's a question to both Maria, Paula, and Erik. I think the criticism of art and NFTs is often that what I heard is a lot of artists who do NFTs get criticized in some way for the old argument is like the ecological footprint, but I think the more stronger argument is like what people kind of like resent is this connection, this intrinsic connection between art and a market that's often tied to NFTs. Where, you know, the topic of money, I think, is often this sort of taboo in art because we want art to be independent from money and independent from market, whereas I question, is that even realistic nowadays? So yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it's the idea that artists should be separated from markets and finance is infantilizing and condescending. I think that every art school should have actually education on you know what it means to be an artist and what it means to sell your artwork, because you become a part of the economy the moment that you probably leave high school. If you can say, you know, there's a point where you know, when you start working, when you start selling your artwork, I think it's very dangerous. I think it leads to burnout as well, to not be used to experiencing a market. I know by experience that it has been incredibly helpful for me to to build resilience and to build flexibility and adaptability to change based on the fact that I know everything is connected to a market. So I think education about this whole apparatus, together with, you know, like some, you know, probably sanitation in terms of, you know, trying to separate your practice and not building for the market, but building with the awareness that there's a market is the way forward.
Thank you. I think there's a direct segue to what you said in the beginning. You work in activism on financial systems, but you also said we need to build tools within the systems in order to subvert them. It's just not enough to be anti-capitalist anymore, because that probably leads us nowhere. Or how would you say it?
Look, because of the whole experiment around alternative decentralized currencies, the Web3 is kind of an analytical tool to make you think, how does money work? Money is not just to make payments. Money is an organizational technology. So that's one of the things, like the radical imagination that gets kicked in the process. And that for artists, I think, is really fundamental. Because, I mean, in Canadian context, German context, I think they're pretty similar. We kind of take for granted that an artist, unless you're really popular and famous, you're going to be writing grants, you know. And the grants, they are also submitted to certain rules. It's maybe not the rules of the market with a big M, but there is definitely other forces at play. So to have even just to dare to imagine another system of funding and to just start working on the different rules by which the system of funding could work makes you see the actual institutions that we're part of differently. And just for that, there's an added value. So in the sphere, we call it Staatskunst, because we like the name, like how it fills the mouth, but also because it's a rich name in English, in German, and it makes you think about the fact that in blockchain, and you said it before, it's a place where you can design new institutions, new rules, new protocols of functioning. And I think for artists, it's fundamental to think a little bit the type of ecologies that they're part of. And I mean, they think about these things.
I just want to add one thing. It's really interesting that people think that, you know, artists can live off grants and not be exposed to financials as well, because there's a whole economy around grants. You know, I know people that are that work that are experts writing grants. So it's just.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of the stuff that we see nowadays is not particularly new. It's just that these technologies make stuff that has been purposefully hidden and obscure before much more transparent, and then allows us to play with it and you know, change the parameters a bit.
I mean, what is blockchain doing? Concretely, at least for me, it's kind of bringing the imaginary of the joint stock venture, like the possibility of having shares in a collective project and to start thinking what would it mean. Like for circus, it's particularly interesting because it's a lot about trust. You need to trust the people you're doing circus with. So it's like a school of trust. And then what does it mean for, like at the social level, to have shares in one another, ventures, collective endeavors. Like this financial mindset, I think, is interesting because it forces a new type of collaboration, and I think it's stimulating. And whatever happens at the speculative level with the cryptocurrency per se and the market, this mindset of like, okay, we're going to start organizing differently so that we learn how to take risks together. I think this is not going to be washed away. I hope. At least that's where I stand. Yeah.
I think that, yeah, I guess my question is like, why do you think like the art world is recently so receptive to this kind of like experimentations? Like, what do you think like the art world brings to the table for this traditionally more economic kind of prototyping? You know, like, and then we see that like places like Daira end up in Documenta, which, I mean, or like in contingent with a lot of art institutions that are rehearsing these models.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that artists are responsible for critiquing technology historically, and I think it's incredibly important that we get the technology in the hands of artists to get the proper critique to be building, to continue building better. Of course, like when when there's tech bros also involved and everything gets a little bit harder. But the fact that we can have these localized experiments and artists thinking of prototypes that work for them or the problems that they see is, it's crucial. And every organization, every technology, Meta, Apple, they have art initiatives, and they have those art initiatives because art is the way. It's the best way to communicate the goals of any technology.
Early in the crypto days, like 2016, Hitoshi Tayel wrote this amazing piece about derivative art, and she's commenting a little bit on how the art world could be thought of as a paradigm for an alter economy. And I thought it was super interesting. This is an article I used a lot. It talks about belonging and becoming. So that would be one contribution, that you're not only building communities based on something you share from the past, but also on what you're aiming for. So that would be one. But also that the art world is a complicated place. It's not all flat. Some people appreciate certain things, others are radically against. And it helps to think, I think, as a paradigm, instead of having a market where everything is evaluated through the means, like general equivalence of money, you have a world in which there are truly a variety of modes of evaluation. And that can be interesting to bring a little bit more of this art world mindset into new economic formation, because it's richer in terms of topology of values.
A brilliant example is actually one that's being worked on at LAS, and one that I know really well, Terra Zero. Terra Zero has been for the past around 7 years, imagining what it's like for a forest to become self-sovereign, aided by blockchain technologies, legal frameworks, and so on and so forth. And this has come from people that studied art in school and that decided to build this prototype, and it's communicated through different art exhibitions, and people started to think of like these ideas because of them, and not because a big corporation decides to put the forest on the blockchain, because the amount of legal loopholes and issues that can come with like bigger parties trying these things would get nothing done.
I mean, I think to answer the question that Barbara, I think one other reason why artists flock to NFTs or experiment that it is not just for the potential to reimagine things, but also I think looking back at the creator economy, why so many people participate in that is that we're just starved out of other options. So I think the logic of the digital economy has taken over more and more parts of our physical lives as well, and erased more and more legacy infrastructures, publishers, labels, etc., that were all part of a market before as well, but at least it was some sort of ecosystem that fed off each other. And what we have now is more and more monopolies that control most of the stuff. And I think, that's why artists are looking for new ways to connect with an audience, but also to finance themselves, but also I think that's the reason why we have so much art nowadays that goes into world building, because we're kind of like at the end with the world we live in, and we try, and blockchain is a radical tool to do that, but also beyond that, there's just a need for reimagining how things work on a very fundamental level.
We need to wrap up. Our stage managers have told me, so I have to be the bearer of bad news. But we have a meetup.
Yes, we'll be in 15 minutes at the meetup space down there in kind of like an open forum discussion. So we didn't on purpose include audience questions because we're going to be there in 15 minutes to answer and discuss with everyone who's interested. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.